I want to go on talking about Biden and his role, because understanding what Biden's real Ukraine scandal was matters a lot. Because this is, I will tell you why I think this is coming out now, why this hysteria, this just a windstorm of attack on Trump is happening. It's because people in the media are catching on to the idea that if Biden even has a remote chance of winning the Democrat primary and becoming a candidate against Trump, if Biden even gets close to it, there's going to be closer and closer scrutiny of his conduct in the Ukraine. Closer and closer scrutiny will make more people realize that Biden was actually extremely, horrifically corrupt. This is what this little story we've been talking about today, this is the tip of the iceberg of all of the corruption that went on between Biden and his son Hunter and the Ukraine, and also with Russia. This is not like a mild little one, tiny little misstep once. So this is what I think the media is trying to do, is to preempt the focus on Biden and his conduct with Ukraine. Say, okay, everybody look at Trump. Look at this guy over here. Look what he did. He actually might have said on the phone to the president of Ukraine, you better look into Biden. Well, first of all, the idea that the Ukrainians otherwise didn't want to look into Biden is completely false. In fact, the Ukrainian government, once they submitted to, they just surrendered to the pressure that Biden gave them and said, okay, we'll fire the prosecutor. 6 months later, the case collapses. They stop looking into it. This is all happening, years ago. But the Ukrainians didn't really forget it. They didn't really stop it. And so I want to just tell you a little bit about what's happened since and how we got here today. The government of the Ukraine, under both the previous president, which was the one that Biden and Obama were dealing with, Ukrainian President Poroshenko, and now President Zelensky, have been trying to deliver information to the U.S. State Department, to our State Department, to give them a heads up about Obama officials and the Democrat Party officials, the DNC, on behalf of Hillary Clinton, requesting the government of Ukraine to interfere in the 2016 election. Please let me make sure you got that. The Ukrainian government had already been trying to reach out to our State Department, our U.S. State Department, to say, there's a lot of information here that we think you should have about Hillary Clinton and the DNC trying to coerce the Ukrainians to interfere in the 2016 elections. So they've tried to present this information to the State Department. The State Department, filled with Obama holdover, deep state types who are there in the State Department to preserve the Obama revolution, to preserve and carry forth the radical shift to the left that the country experienced under Obama. These people would not receive the information. They literally said, no thanks, we don't want to hear it. Our State Department, realizing Ukraine is trying to give them information about corruption of Obama and the DNC, has been saying, no, hands off, we don't, arm's length, stay away, we don't want to hear it. So then the Ukrainian government took the information and they went to a private lawyer in Washington, asked the lawyer to give this information to the State Department. And allegedly he did. State Department, crickets. They're not going to look into it, because looking into corruption of the Obama/Clinton people and maybe into Biden violates rule number 1 in the deep state, which is you never, ever, ever, ever can accuse a Democrat of wrongdoing. You never do it. You won't investigate. You won't look into it. You just look the other way. Done. So the Ukrainians, still wondering, why is it the State Department isn't interested in this? Why isn't America interested in this news? They then began to work through and ultimately went through Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney. Giuliani is now in the picture. So when you had the Wall Street Journal burst on the scene last week and just act like the sky was falling, we've discovered the most astonishing scandal ever, that Trump happened to have a conversation with the president, with his counterpart, his president of the Ukraine, and telling President Zelensky that he thought the Ukrainians should still be looking into what the heck Biden did, and probably what the other Democrats did. The Wall Street Journal even, but certainly CNN, the left-wing media, has been trying to act like this is the most shocking revelation, that a president would actually encourage Ukrainians to look into it. Ukrainians are saying, we've been looking into a lot of corruption. We're trying to tell you. We tried to tell your State Department. They wouldn't let us, they wouldn't receive the information. They just didn't want to hear it. Same with when they had a private lawyer provide that information to the State Department. So here we are, we're moving forward in 2019. Ukrainians are, Zelensky and Trump are working together. Well, in fact, they're going to be together this week at the UN. Zelensky and Trump are going to meet this week. I think that's the first time they're going to meet in person at the UN this coming Thursday, I think it is. And so, they'll eventually talk about things. But the idea that the media and the Democrats are trying to convince the American people that the scandal to watch here, the scandal to keep your eye on, is what Trump said in some conversation in July with Ukrainian President Zelensky, and not what Biden has been doing and did under the Obama administration as vice president, protecting his son and his son's business from a criminal investigation by the top prosecutor in the Ukraine, and actually withholding American money to Ukraine until they agreed to fire this prosecutor. I mean, if there ever was an example of the absolute convoluting of justice and truth, it is the way in which the media is acting like this is the most hysterical thing that has ever, just the most amazing wrongdoing, because Trump might have said to Zelensky, you better look into this. And again, no evidence Trump had any quid pro quo. In fact, the Ukrainian foreign minister has come forward saying, there was no wrongdoing, as far as we can see. I mean, he's acknowledged, they talked about a lot of things, but there was nothing inappropriate. There was no effort by President Trump to tell Zelensky that we're going to withhold money or promise money. He said there was no pressure at all in that call. This is someone who actually knows about the call, not an anonymous alleged tipster to our government who's trying to stir things up, but actually someone aware of what would happen in the call is saying there was no pressure. There just wasn't any. But this excitement in Washington about the idea that maybe they've uncovered something in which they can use it to impeach Trump has even gotten to the point that Nancy Pelosi, who's been trying to say all along, there's not enough here, guys, there's not enough here, to her fellow Democrats. You can't impeach a president because you don't like him. You can't impeach a president because he won and you wish he had lost. She's been trying to tell the Democrats, you have nothing to impeach him on. That's what she's been trying to say. But this little story being spun as though it is the kind of scandal of the century, which until, at least based on everything we know today, there's not even a whiff of a scandal in this conversation. But, the media, but Nancy Pelosi has said, maybe this is it. Maybe this actually will get close to impeachment. I want to talk about the media's role in this for just a moment. It was so interesting. There was a Wall Street Journal piece that came out last week. It was the big, announcement that this was reported as a news story, not an opinion piece, a news story. Trump repeatedly pressed Ukraine president to investigate Biden's son. And, there was another even crummier, really obnoxious, just stupid level editorial in the Wall Street Journal today by some guy named Alan Cullison, who is basically saying that this is the most outrageous potential scandal. If Trump did what we think he did, this is horrible, this is the end of the world. And he went on to say in his piece that, Trump's trying to make reference to what Joe Biden did in the Ukraine, protecting his son, arm twisting Ukrainians to fire a prosecutor to protect his son, and threatening to withhold money, as he admitted, as you saw on open television, to withhold money from Ukraine until they agreed with his arm twisting, fire the prosecutor to protect my son. The idea that that whole episode is known to all these people in Washington, including this joker who wrote the piece at Wall Street Journal, and yet what he reported in this piece that I'm telling you about is he said, and after, everyone's looked at it, everyone's confirmed nothing wrong with what Obama did, with what Biden did, nothing wrong with arm twisting, nothing wrong with saying, we demand you stop investigating my son's company, nothing wrong with the idea that Biden said, we're going to hold back our aid to your country until you do what we say. I mean, this guy tried to pass that off as no big deal, but this idea that maybe Trump said something in a call with Zelensky last month or in July, that is a scandal of the century. So I looked into this guy. I'm like, why would somebody in the Wall Street Journal that, people always say, well, if it's the Wall Street Journal, it's probably the conservative view. Just to be clear, the Wall Street Journal has plenty of writers, reporters who are not conservative. They have a fairly conservative editorial page, but they've hired writers and who publish on the editorial page and people who write who are simply not conservative. They are very much out to get conservatives, just like so much of the mainstream media, even the Wall Street Journal. And this guy Cullison, getting to my point, I looked into it, like, why would a guy write this just completely? You could have found it on, Huffington Post or Vox or Atlantic or one of those just well-known left-wing rags. But he wrote it in the Wall Street Journal. This guy Cullison, he does have a very Ivy Leaguish education. I looked into him. He has he did work for Wall Street. He works, I'm going to get to the important point in a moment, but he first worked for Dow Jones as a copy reader. He began with the Associated Press. In June 1995, long time ago, he moved to Moscow as a reporter, and in May 1998 became the Newswire's Moscow bureau chief. This is a guy who loves leftism and communism so much. He's lived in Russia since 1995. His head, he goes to liking whatever it is Biden and Obama like. He would like the idea that Biden arm twisted the Ukrainians. He would, this is a guy who's got his bias so woven into how he sees the world that he actually, with a straight face, I assume writing he had a straight face, put in a line in this piece he wrote about, and people looked into it, not one darn thing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, with Biden going over to the Ukraine and arm twist him to fire prosecutors looking into his own son's business and threaten to withhold American money. Seriously. So, there were other pieces written by various outlets talking about the whole Biden adventure. But I am just skimming the surface of this story today. I want you to understand how serious this is. Number one, Biden and his son and all of the dealings with, as I say, not just the Ukrainians, but with the Russians and other entities, the Biden people team, which is, Obama, Biden, use their power in very corrupt ways, especially this deal with this whole setup with deals and whose son can be on some company. In fact, Biden's son became a board member of this Ukrainian company that was being investigated and about to be prosecuted. His son became a board member there with absolutely no expertise in anything the company did. He earned as much as $83,000 a month. I'll take that gig. $83,000 a month with no knowledge of any kind about the business Burisma was engaged in, but he was, after all, the son of the vice president. That's how Hunter Biden got this job. That's why his dad was, in the middle of things in the Ukraine, doing what he could to protect his son's interests. And as people became more and more aware of how corrupt the company was, and they're looking into it, in fact, Britain had frozen this company's assets. The Ukrainians looking into how corrupt this company was. And so Papa Joe stepped in on behalf of his son back when he was still vice president and just said, you can't have any money from us. You're going to fire this prosecutor and drop the investigation. And so they did. So the idea that this story emerged out of nowhere in the last, since last Friday, and all of a sudden, who knew? There was questions about Joe Biden's conduct in the Ukraine. There were people in America, there have been since the whole thing happened, wanting to understand what in the world Biden was doing. There's a great book about it, Peter Schweizer's book, and I have the name of the book in my Why It Matters. I don't have it right in front of me, but Peter Schweizer wrote a book saying, essentially laying out, and to be really clear, it's not just Biden. Many officials, many people on both parties, so it's not even just all Democrats, major international big players, big money people, John Kerry, use their money for international string pulling and influence. Peter Schweizer's book was Secret Empires. That was it, Secret Empires. It's a great read. There's a whole chapter just on Biden talking about how corrupt this was. So now we'll come back to the Washington news of today. You must realize that everything I just told you, again, which is only the tip of the iceberg, but everything I just told you, the people writing these stories at the Wall Street Journal and CNN and Atlantic, CNN and Atlantic are typically left-wing. Whatever they can do to destroy Trump is that's their kind of journalistic standard. But these people decided that all of the corruption known to have occurred, which Biden has admitted on national television has occurred, or at a televised conference everyone's seen, that's all fine. That's all fine. We're not going to talk about that. But man, if Trump actually may have encouraged Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, to look into it again, now that's the scandal. That is worth just having a meltdown. The guy should be impeached. Biden got caught in a bit of a fib. I have one more clip of Biden in a moment, but he got caught in a little tiny fib. He was asked, actually it's a big fib, he was asked about whether he knew, whether he was involved or any way connected, aware of his son's business dealings, because of course Biden's going to say, I didn't even know, anything about what my son Hunter was doing. I had no reason. I didn't go after that prosecutor to protect my son who's on the board of the company being investigated. I didn't even know. So, Joe Biden said recently, I've never discussed my son's business dealings in the Ukraine. Unfortunately for him, his son, Hunter Biden, in a very lengthy interview, actually said, yes, I have talked to my dad about Burisma, this Ukrainian company. So, Biden, he fibbed. He thinks, I guess he's protecting his son or something. But what he's really doing is kind of telling America that he's trying to distance himself. Joe Biden trying to distance himself, doesn't really want America to understand, what he did. But folks, I'm going to wrap up this segment and this topic for today to say we may come back to this because this whole secret empire, Biden, in the Biden family, to be clear, and the kind of things they pulled while he had the power as the presidency, and he did, as he was power of the vice presidency, while he was vice president, he actually was in charge. Obama put him in charge of that region of the world. He was the one to deal on behalf of the Obama administration with the Ukrainian government. He was the one on top of things on the Ukrainian government. And this was what he did there, what he decided to do. Now, this is, and backing up from that, recognize this is still Biden functioning in an era when, Hillary Clinton had been the Secretary of State the first 4 years under Obama. Many, many people put in by Obama, kind of the deep state layered into the Secretary of State's office, the Department of State's office, so that when you get around to the Ukraine, trying to give information to the Department of State, those people who are loyal to Obama, Clinton, Biden, leftism, socialism, those people, they just weren't going to let the Ukrainians get the information to them. Ukrainians get the information to them, which is why part of the reason this whole thing has now come out public, because they couldn't get the Department of State to listen. They finally went through Giuliani. Giuliani, again, meeting with Ukrainians, was in response to the Ukrainians' inability to get our own State Department to listen. And then, so Giuliani has had a couple of meetings on behalf of the Obama administration of the Trump administration, with different officials from the Ukrainian government talking about this whole investigation, how much more should happen. I have one more clip I want to quickly mention. There was a quote by Biden. This is, he used this statement. I'm going to play it first and then just ask you if what in this statement, in this clip of Biden, reminds you of something on the playground in second grade. So this is our other clip from Biden. Very wonderful.
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated. He is violating every basic norm of a president. You should be asking him the question, why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader, if that's what happened. That appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum, and he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
Okay. I'm sorry. Is he like in second grade? The idea that this is a candidate for the presidency who is, was the vice president for 8 years, and he says, I'll beat him like a drum. Honestly, he's like a second grader. But on a more serious note, just consider the irony, the hypocrisy. This is Joe Biden, who, if you read Peter Schweizer's Secret Empires, if you read articles about it, it's a long and serious book. If you read articles about it, this is a guy who used his power, the vice presidency, over in the Ukraine to protect his own son, to withhold money, U.S. dollars, from Ukraine until he could force the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor who was looking into the corrupt practices of a business in which his son was on the board. And he's trying to say that he thinks Trump is abusing his power. I mean, this is another, there's a funny clip, and I didn't find it fast enough today. There's a funny clip. I don't know if Trump just wrote it or he said it out loud, but he basically said, this is another mission of the left, another effort of the left, where they're going to end up looking foolish. That they, in fact, I think he encouraged the media, yeah, you keep digging. You can go ahead and keep digging. Because Trump, knows exactly what Biden did. Most of Washington knows what Biden did. But all that corruption Biden did, he's perfectly comfortable staring reporters in the face with cameras rolling, trying to virtue signal his goodness and say, yeah, this is an example of Trump's corruption, Trump's abuse of power. I mean, the irony is so thick, it's just staggering. So we're going to come back to this story. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those stories that kind of comes up and goes back down as soon as the Democrats realize we have nothing here. We tried the Trump-Russia collusion. We tried a bunch of other things, didn't work. This is going to rise and fall too. But it's a real window on the absolute determination of the American left to find any way possible to take out President Trump, to find a basis for impeachment. And it's also a window on their absolute willingness to cover for anything any corrupt Democrat ever did, including Hillary Clinton and including Joe Biden.